Next will be Mosiah chapter 14. This one, as it says right at the beginning, is Abinadi quoting the 53rd chapter of Isaiah to King Noah and the priests, right? So this is, I haven't compared it, but this is pretty much word for word from chapter 53 of Isaiah.
Yea, even doth not Isaiah say, Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our face from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not.
These verses are talking about a he, right? And who's the he? Jesus, right? Okay, so this is prophecy of Christ, right? So this starts out by saying, Isaiah saying, who has believed our report, and to who is the arm of the Lord revealed, right? And then the answer to that being Israel, right? That's who that's who Christ came to at first, right? So now in verse 2 and 3, it's starting to describe some of the attributes of Christ, and so you can see from these things that it does line up with things that actually happened in the New Testament, and gives us some information here, right? So like in the 2, it says that he has no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there's no beauty that we should desire him, right? That almost sounds insulting, right? But it's saying that Jesus would be nobody, I'd say special to the eye, right? That if he came and he was a movie star, handsome, right, that people would have been flocking around him just because of his looks, right? But he wasn't like that. He was just your average guy, your average carpenter that probably had rough hands from working with his hands, and perhaps from time spent outside, and he looked like anybody else. So it says there was no great beauty about him that way, and so that's important to know that why would God come down in a way that would attract people by his looks as opposed to by what's inside? That would be inconsistent with the way we're taught, right? But now in 3, right, it says he's despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and so forth, right? Because this is what Jesus had to go through for us. That there were those who flocked around him, but for the most part, a lot of times he was a despised person, right? That usually he was welcome until he taught certain things, and then they wanted him to go, right? And so when he, for example, when he taught that he says, "I'm the bread of life. You have to eat my flesh and drink my blood in order to have eternal life." And then people were like, "Ew," they thought he was actually speaking about his real body and blood, and so then they didn't want to hang around him anymore, right? And when he cast the devils out of the one man, right? And he made him go into the swine. The swine ran down into the water and were drowned. Well, then the man who owned the swine was mad, and the old people wanted him to leave town, basically, right? So here he was casting out devils, but yet they were mad because of the pigs, right? So there was, or any time that he started to tell them who he was and said, in me this day, this prophecy is fulfilled. Well, again, a blasphemer, they didn't want to hear that. So, he was typically one that was despised when he did something good or said something that was true, because they didn't want to hear it or didn't want to see it. Right? So this was the kind of life that he led.
Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquities of us all.
4, it says, of course, he's borne our griefs, carried our sorrows. We know that we can cast all that upon Christ even today, right? And 5 is starting to describe even what he went through with the crucifixion. It says he was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. Right? You think about it that way, it says, all the things that he bore was because people are sinful, so that it was necessary for him to bear that. Normally, when people were punished that way, it was because of their own things that they did, but here, Jesus bore that for our sake, that he was the only one who really was punished for somebody else that way. It says, wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. Right? So with his stripes we were healed. When he was whipped, right? That refers to the stripes, all right? So you can think of that the stripes that were put upon him that way, so he was being injured, yes, as we're being healed, because he was bearing the punishment for us, and so therefore we didn't have to be punished for what we would do, because Jesus bore it for us. Right? And now in 6, it's making it clear that this refers to everybody, right? Because it says all we like sheep have gone astray. So it's not just saying that it's some, or this is for some and not for others. We are often compared to sheep in that way. So it says that all we have like sheep have gone astray and gone off in our own way, right? So the sheep are used because it's a good example, a good comparison to people, because the sheep without the shepherd, they would go every which way. They wouldn't of their own accord just kind of line up and walk along and be orderly. They'd be all over the place. So it takes the shepherd to keep them in line and keep them moving in the same direction. And so that's why people often use the sheep, because without the Lord to direct us, without the Lord's leading and directing us, that we'd be all over the place as well. So,
He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, because he had done no evil, neither was any deceit in his mouth.
when you look at 7, it says, he opened not his mouth and brought as a lamb to the slaughter, right? That when Jesus was going to be crucified, it says that they were starting to question him, right? They were like looking for him to try to make some explanation for who he said he was, or whatever he had said, but yet for the most part he just didn't say anything, right? Right? It wasn't his calling to try to talk them out of crucifying him, because that was the plan of salvation, and also because they already had their minds made up anyway, right? So whatever he would have said, they wouldn't have really believed it or accepted it anyway. So what's the point? This just basically accepted the punishment, didn't try to get out of it, mainly as was said, because that was the plan of salvation. He had to bear that anyway. The 8 says he was cut off out of the land of the living, right? So of course he was here, took on flesh, and he left the land of the living for the sake of our transgressions. Made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. Making his grave with the wicked is because he was crucified alongside those who deserved to be crucified, right? That was a punishment for those who were wicked. So he allowed himself to be killed even in a very humiliating way, the one that was reserved for criminals, right? Now this is with the rich in his death. Can you remember where he was buried, or where his body was laid? In the tomb, and whose tomb was it? It actually belonged to a wealthy man, the man named Joseph of Arimathea. Okay, provided the tomb for his body, right? That he gave that. So yeah, he was a wealthy man. It was his own burial plot, if you will, and so that's why it says he was with the rich in his death, right? So he was crucified with the wicked, but in essence buried with the rich. So again, you can see that as we're going through this, that these are all things that, having read the New Testament, you can point out how this lines up. But remembering that this was said by Isaiah some hundreds of years before Christ, so you can see how it lines up in pretty good detail, right? So I mean, I guess we're reading it right now in Mosiah chapter 14, but it's actually from Isaiah chapter 53, which was much before this.
Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him; he hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed. He shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sins of many, and made intercession for the transgressors.
Some of this we've mentioned already, but just quickly, it says 10, it says, it pleased the Lord to bruise him, he had put him to grief, right? That he was again bruised for our transgressions, right? And let's see what else. In 11 again, it talks about bearing our iniquities. Now in 12, the part I wanted to get to is towards the second half of 12. It says, he poured out his soul to death, was numbered with the transgressors, right? And so that, at that time, he was punished as if he was a transgressor. It says he bore the sins of many and made intercession for the transgressors. Now what transgressors? Now, he's like the go-between, if you will, right? He's the go-between between us and God, and it's because of what he did that he was able to be that for us, all right? And because he bore our sins, because he was bruised for us, because he made that difference for us and paid for our iniquities, so therefore he becomes the go-between between us and the Father. So that's who Isaiah is talking about, and then this is who Abinadi is talking about as he's describing it. So he wants to make sure that people understand why he's saying that the law of Moses would not bring salvation. Why the law of Moses was not enough by itself for people to be saved, because of this person being talked about in Isaiah chapter 53. All right, so that's why he's bringing this out. So he's giving a very complete message here, right? The complete sermon. He's not just stopping at the law of Moses part and saying, well, that's only going to be around for a little while. He's saying that because this is what's coming after that. This is what's coming down the line. This person that's spoken of in Isaiah chapter 53.